Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It is the 7th of November, and it's starting to feel like fall. It's crisp, and it's beautiful out, and you can go outside and be active without working up that kind of sticky summer sweat that makes you just, I don't know about you. I'm uncomfortable, like when I'm standing still in the shade, trying not to touch the rest of myself, and I just can't cool down. Especially if there's no body of water or anything nearby to jump in. But now, it is so nice out. It's just, you can go outside. It's just crisp. Feel like doing stuff. It's really weird.
Yeah, and then when you go do stuff, though, you have to adjust because then everything is cold and it takes a lot longer to warm up. So, I went out and hit golf balls and, holy shit, I couldn't feel my hands at first because it was so cold. And then by the time I got warmed up, it was like the cold was affecting the clubs in a way where they weren't bending the same.
Oh, wow.
It's like, yeah, I mean, and then this is something I've also noticed, now that I do a sauna more frequently, it's like in the same way that bodies of water take a long time to change temperature, it's like the blood and plasma in our bodies changes temperature over the course of time during the seasonal changes, and you'll absorb cold into your body, and it's like in your the blood in your plasma, or the plasma and in your blood and the blood itself, and obviously the water in your body is changing temperature, and the surface stuff can change a lot quicker. But what I'm realizing is there's deep tissue cold that gets trapped. And then when I'm in the sauna, I know it gets released because it drops the temperature. So I'm it'll be 113 1 second. And then the cold, I can feel it. It's like the temperature in the sauna drops to a point where I'm this doesn't even feel uncomfortable anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But it's because the cold that was in my blood or whatever wherever it was in my body is getting released into the actual sauna at that point. And it's you carry that shit around with you in the sense of, then if your muscles are carrying the cold, then they're constricted. So your joints are more sore. So then when I get out of the sauna, a lot of the soreness has gone away because of the constriction going away. And I'm seeing how these things correlate, where then people during winter never do the sauna thing, so they carry this cold and thus are constricted all winter, and you get these back problems where it's it's because your body is basically constricted.
So
on the internal and external layer the entire season. So
the elementary school simple barometric pressure experiment where you take a balloon and you put it over a jar and you glue a straw on it so you can observe changes in atmospheric pressure. I wonder how much effect atmospheric pressure actually has on our bodies, because I know we have the ability to thermoregulate and the ability to maintain pressure of our vascular systems and our hydraulic systems essentially, and I wonder how much effect that we just take for granted. Because this happens all the time, high pressure system moves in, people start acting crazy, the moon's in full effect, it affects the water, everyone's acting crazy. Or is it just an excuse to act crazy?
I mean, I'm sure it does have an effect, but it's also not. Some people use it as an excuse, but that's the difference between people who overcome their base instincts
Yeah.
and those who use their base instincts as an excuse to let loose. And that's kind of, that's where we have to coexist with those assholes.
Let loose.
I blacked out. I didn't know what I was doing. I just blacked out. I don't know. I don't know, man. It must have been the alcohol or my adrenaline. I don't know. Something happened. I just blacked out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people invoke they blacked out as an excuse for something like occurring, and then them saying that they didn't have control over their own body, which I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just a matter of like, more than often it's implausible, and the people who are saying it are just using that as an excuse to invoke plausible deniability on their own actions, which is fucked up to be like, oh yeah, I blacked out and walked across town.
So the
like
two times that I have blacked out, I woke up in a location that I didn't know how I got there, and I couldn't remember anything after a portion of the night. Both of those nights were on, I was with friends celebrating on St. Patrick's Day. So the intent was to get drunk anyways. And before I went out and met with people, I ate a bunch of fried chicken. So I lined my stomach with grease, essentially effectively bypassing first pass metabolism. And I got, incredibly drunk. And the second time I did it, I had a good idea what was going to happen, and I, went for it anyways. But every other time that I've drank and gotten, experience that, seat of your pants drunken experience that people seem to crave, I always got sick and puked before I ever got to the point where I couldn't remember everything for the rest of the night. It was only when I added really greasy food, and a lot of it. That was the only time it ever did that to me.
And I mean,
but I didn't do a bunch of dumb shit. I just woke up at someone's house because someone had the foresight to take me home or take me someplace where I could sleep.
Yeah, you weren't actually doing anything. What I'm talking about is the people who are like saying they're blacked out and then doing other stuff, and it's not even necessarily because they're drunk. Like, people will say they like get seizures and black out, but then will start attacking people or something. And it's those types of situations where these people aren't even drunk, and then they'll say they black, and it's like, that shit happens way more often than it should. And I'm just wondering, like, what percentage of people who invoke that I blacked out are just using that as like a way to do shit they know is socially unacceptable, and then not get any real repercussions from it. Because that's where I'm like, I don't care if you were drunk. Whatever you did when you were blacked out, you're responsible for. So this notion of like, when people get drunk and then say shit that's fucked up, and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was blacked out drunk. Well, you still said it. It doesn't matter how drunk you were. You still said some fucked up shit. So the fact that you were drunk, because I had a friend do that to me, and he tried to like invoke that, and he was like, oh, I was blacked out. And I'm like, well, that's fine. And you may not, and I would never tell him what he said, just to, I'm going to call you on your shit. If you say you're blacked out and I get pissed off at some shit you said, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to be pissed off at you and make you wonder what you said if you really blacked out. Cause then it's like, if he truly blacked out, yeah, he's going to fucking live the rest of his life not knowing what the fuck he said to make me not want to be his friend.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's on him. Well, that's why you shouldn't get blackout drunk.
People who get blackout drunk and get behind the wheel of a car and kill somebody still get punished.
Yep.
So people are still to be held accountable for their behavior. It shouldn't matter if somebody's blacked out. If somebody's on drugs and they do some dumb shit, they don't remember doing it, they're still responsible for what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is, again, that's why you shouldn't get drunk and do that shit. Because this is where I'm saying, like,
I mean, obviously alcohol's not a drug.
A decade later. And I'm not pissed about it, but I still I would still not want to be friends with somebody who is willing to get so drunk that they'll say some offensive ass shit to someone who's supposed to be their friend, let alone their best friend. And that's where I'm like, I don't need that person in my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is where I think a lot of people are afraid to like cut those people out of their lives, with the ones who are willing to like, it don't matter if you got epilepsy. If you got epilepsy and start doing some fucked up shit, I'm not gonna be your friend. I don't give a fuck. And that's where people go, oh, that's ableist. No, the fuck it's not. People should not be able to use something as an excuse to abuse others or lash out. So if you say you got Tourette syndrome, okay, fine. But don't say you got Tourette syndrome and start cussing at me and start saying some shit and start trying to hit me and expect me to just, oh, you got Tourette syndrome. Nah, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna invoke Tourette syndrome and invoke these hands at that point, because that's where I'm like, you can't be pulling that shit and then attacking somebody else's person or being. And that's where I'm like, I'm over the notion that you can like use some sort of drug or handicap as an excuse to be abusive. Because you see like a lot of people who get paralyzed. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what you hear is a lot of people who get paralyzed end up lashing out at first. Well, you can go fucking rehabilitate yourself, fuckhead. That don't give you an excuse to be a dick. I don't give a fuck if you lose your fucking legs. That does not give you an excuse to be a fucking dick to another human being. And people got to start being adults and saying this shit so we don't have fucking douchebag handicapped people running around just because we have douchebag able-bodied people running around justifying, oh, let them be. No, fuck that. We're not going to allow douchebags in this society anymore, because I'm kind of sick of fucking extrovert douchebags being the one who set the rules. I don't know when we got together and decided the extrovert douchebags get to be the ones who decide what base social behavior is, but based on how people on planes and how people in restaurants are getting treated, extrovert douchebags have become the fucking standard for behavior. And I'm saying no. I'm saying no more. Like, this is kind of where it's like that shit needs to be excised from fucking civilized society. Those people are fucking cave people as far as I'm concerned. I don't give a fuck if they got iPhones. I don't give a fuck if they got clothes that have words on them. They're just cave people as far as I'm concerned. If you look for an excuse to treat another human like they're lesser than you, you're just a cave person to me. Because that's where I'm saying, like, we as human beings have come to this point where we gotta be like, hey, we're on this same fucking planet. And if we don't all try to survive this shit together, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now as humans. And if you can't accept that, you're not able to put aside your ego for the sake of the greater good. I'm not dealing with those people anymore.
Man,
the people who can't put aside their ego for the greater good, I'm done. I'm done with them.
We live in a world that's simultaneously so small that, you know, some person in Podunkville, because they have access to internet, knows everything that's going on. But the world is so big that these same people are unable to recognize that there's a very specific group of people who are actively trying to destroy the life support system of our one spaceship. We have one spaceship, and they're destroying the life support system. They're like actively undermining it all the time. And they want to fight over the insulation of the spaceship because we can make plastic out of it.
Meanwhile, the person they claim is going to save us and put us on Mars can't make a fucking capsule with the working goddamn toilet. So no, he ain't going to get us to fucking Mars. He can't get fucking working toilet in orbit.
Yep.
That happened 2 times
the
now.
SpaceX toilet has failed. You know, NASA just did that whole thing where they kind of offshored the development of a new toilet. And the prize was something like $50,000 for one of the most critical systems on a spaceship. I don't care what anyone thinks. The toilet is every bit as important as the shielding for the electronics.
Well, back when I was young and naive, I used to watch Big Bang Theory. And like one of the points of like making a joke was how Wolowitz was the guy that got stuck with designing the toilet. And it's like, dude, that's what you're right. It's one of the most important things on the system. Obviously, they have to get up there, so we have to make sure the rockets work. So the rocket science is great, but shitting in zero gravity is science in itself. So the notion of making that the subject of jokes is why we can't get astronauts in space with the working fucking toilet, because we mock that shit in pop culture.
Yeah.
Oh, you need a fucking toilet? You little astronaut, you gonna take a little poopy on yourself?
I also want to take a little moment to point out that they also successfully grew a bunch of chili peppers in space and ate space peppers and likely got the space shits. So, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, tacos in space. Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Yeah, 4 hours later, though.
Cosmic diarrhea.
Oh, God. So, that right there, if we're going to have tacos in space, if we're going to have space tacos, which is arguably one of the coolest ideas that's come out of this whole program so far, this involvement with SpaceX capsules and all that. Space tacos. 100% support that. I want space tacos. But they've got to figure out the problem about the space shits, the cosmic shits, because if they can't contain that shit,
yeah. I think people just...
I mean, we can't have clean spaceships in our fantasy space dramas if they can't figure out a working toilet. I mean, no white hallways, no well-lit anything. It's going to smell really weird.
Yeah.
I mean, zero G, man. I just hope they figured out how to, the diet, like the space food, so people don't get gas. And like,
oh, have you never seen the space food stuff?
I mean, are they like...
It's a really complex process.
Are they farting around the capsule, like propelling themselves with space gas?
Well, that is an issue, but their suits are like... I mean, not propelling, but again, it's like you can't be farting in a capsule and having the gas just build up. So yeah, it's something that their systems are meant to like be filtering the air and like pulling any pollutants out of it. So that's one of the reasons being in space is so it's so hostile. At any given moment, you have to make sure that your fucking air filters are, there's probably 4 or 5 backups waiting to go online in case the main one fails, because it's like, any sort of gas buildup everything is worthless because you had too much carbon in the fucking cabin, or too much methane, or too much whatever, too much nitrogen. Just pick a fucking... Humans can get poisoned so easily if anything starts to build up in their blood, which is where like nitrogen building up is like effectively it boils you from the inside. So that's when someone goes to the bottom of the ocean, or it doesn't have to be about the bottom. Every 33 feet is an atmosphere. So every atmosphere you go, you have to delay your resurfacing, because if you come up too fast, the nitrogen in your blood will start boiling and you'll fucking boil from the inside out. And that's what they call the bends. But it's a matter of the deeper you go and the faster you come up, it can like be fatal. So some people who were coming up too fast would just like die. And this is probably something that was at the root of like spontaneous combustion or some shit, because they were just pulling people up too fast and didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Shit like that, where, I mean, there are some cases where people then would like explode, but it's like they probably weren't farting or some shit. And it's like, there's always going to be, it's never spontaneous. But yet I digress. What I'm getting at is humans are really susceptible to build up. And that's kind of where it's like, whether it's a gout or fucking gas in your gut that starts to hurt. Like we're not really good at expelling things really fast. So it's like if we get a nitrogen buildup, or if we get a carbon buildup, or even fucking oxygen can make you like go like have hallucinations if you're having too much of it because our body can't handle it. So it's like
It's a hypoxia.
human bodies are just not good at expelling things in general. So it's like if it builds up too fast, it's gonna kill us. And this is where, like, getting back to that, you can't have the fucking toilets not working, because then eventually the fecal matter is gonna build up in the cabin, and people are gonna start getting sepsis for like no reason, and it's shit like that where, yeah, you know, Wallowitz should have never been mocked. That should have never been a point of mockery.
Seriously.
Full circle.
In Space Force, Dr. Chan makes this, very candid remark. He says, to be trapped underwater with 100 men's farts, you have to be so strong.
Yeah, man. Somebody light a match in that bitch is fucking going up. You know? That's why the oxygen on its own, but that's why they're not supposed to have sparking shit.
It's crazy, the videos of flames in zero gravity, because they don't travel the way that we're used to fire moving. It doesn't behave like we're used to. It doesn't climb up surfaces. It just expands. It just radiates out as it consumes the available fuel. And so if you're in a chamber that's got gas in it, and of course, specific gravity probably
oxygen,
it probably would separate the gases to a lesser degree. But one little spark in a spaceship, fuck.
Yep.
It's going to be a really unfortunate light show.
Yeah. Oh man, so that's where I'm like, the people who overestimate SpaceX's capacity to put humans on Mars in colonies, they're dangerous, because they effectively get the narrative to a point where enough people are invested in it that they're just burning money to this fantasy. This is not even really sci-fi. This is like a cyberpunk dystopian fantasy, because in this one, there's only a few real winners, and most people are subjects to be sacrificed for the sake of what do you call himself? The Imperator of Mars. That fuckhead. Fuck that guy, man. And he's not even like,
he's not even on Mars.
I mean, he's not even like shy about it. And this is where the way he's so crass about knowing that his method of going about it will result in just a ton of people dying along the way. And he's not even really concerned about that, because the end goal, which he would never accomplish, even if we put all the Earth's money towards it, the way he's going about it is a complete fucking waste. And again, my thing is like, the way he's responding with this Twitter poll about should he sell stock to start solving hunger, he's just acknowledging that he doesn't pay taxes, and he's just throwing it in everybody's faces. So the people who support Elon Musk at this point are like the weirdest kind of self-hating human beings. I don't know if they're still human, but they just definitely hate themselves.
Good for him. He made a rocket that gets payloads into barely orbit.
But he didn't make that.
I know. And he also built a bunch of cars that the roof flew off when people were driving him on the highway.
And he didn't build those either. He commissioned them engineers who had to go against him frequently because he requested ridiculous shit.
I'm just trying to like cover the entire mythology of Elon. He also by hand assembled that toilet that failed. So, if we're gonna, we might as well just go along with it, because the mythology of Elon is so profound. The guy can build anything. He can do anything. He can clearly he built by hand the first Tesla Roadster, obviously, because it works so well. Fuck. It just blows my mind how he somehow just has so much effect over all
it's
this.
A cult, man.
It is.
It's
it really
cult.
is. Like all he has to do is like say, a dog breed's name, and all of a sudden a bunch of people are fawning over some technology that they don't really seem to be able to explain. And then lo and behold, the bottom drops out, and then it swings back up like all these other cryptocurrencies. But like one person shouldn't have that kind of like majestic power over any kind of economy unless it's gambling.
That's not decentralization.
No, it's not. It's like the opposite of decentralization.
Exact opposite of decentralization, in fact. Which is where I'm like, okay, people are always talking about NFTs and how artists can make money off of it. It's like, yeah, that's great. So stop giving money to fucking Grimes and Elon for their NFTs and give it to actual artists. But no, the people who are making the most money off of NFTs and cryptos already have money in the first place. So this narrative that artists can make money off of NFTs, yeah, they could, but they're not the ones who are really making money off of it. So I'm just like tired of rich people selling poor people a narrative that they're going to let them invest out of poverty. It's bullshit. That's never going to work. It's never going to happen.
I mean, I've got a bridge in on some digital property in the digital metaverse that I can sell somebody.
Oh, God. Investing is like one of the worst words in the English language because it gives people the veneer of some sort of intellectual integrity to what they're doing.
Isn't virtual land basically like it's not even a full domain. It's not even a website. It's like a small subsection of the data on a platter that might comprise a portion of a website that maybe has some kind of online server on it that provides a service of kind.
Let's not ridicule virtual stuff for the sake of just ridiculing virtual stuff, because I like, it's like that shit happens and I'm like, I see it happening frequently with like money, and then that stuff has already like happened in the tangible version of it. And I'll give an example. So if you develop a piece of real property, I'm not talking about digital property, and you put an apartment complex on it and you sell the apartment complex, you fill it up, you're making money, but you used under standard materials, and then your fucking building collapses and then people die. Oh, wait, that happened in Miami. Was that an actual benefit and an actual positive use of the real world property? So this is where I mean, like, just because something is real does not automatically mean it's better for someone than the digital version of it. Because that's where the way I'm looking at it is there's physical space and there's digital space. Digital real estate is developed digital space. Physical real estate that's on the market is developed physical space. If something is not able to be developed, it's no different than a piece of digital land that can't be developed on. And that's where I'm like, at a certain point, these things are equivalent on both sides. And this is where I mean, like, okay, you look at the billboards in electronic arts games. Those are now, I mean, they've been this way for a while. Advertisers that are not electronic arts will buy billboards in video games such that the digital real estate of a billboard alongside a digital racetrack is just as valuable as the physical equivalent of that billboard. So this is where I mean, they can be equivalent in value and in not having any value. So that's where I'm like, digital real estate should not be ridiculed just for the sake of it being digital. But the problem is Americans don't know what they're doing with the physical real estate market. So they have no business getting into the digital real estate market. And that's where I'm like, it's not that digital real estate's useless. It's just that the people who are getting into it, they don't know what the fuck to do with physical real estate. So of course they're not going to know what to do with digital real estate. So that's the problem. It's not that digital real estate is any inherently worse than physical real estate. It's that people who are developing or not developing these properties and spaces are trying to create value to sell it, to build capital in this fucking dumbass cycle in which people are selling apartment buildings, physical homes with foundations that haven't been updated since 1919, and somehow that property is being sold for $500,000, just waiting for the fucking thing to fall apart or the black mold to kill somebody, because it's just hot potato of a fucking lie. And that's where I mean, like, it's not the digital real estate, it's those people.
Oh, people are spending like 200,000 real world dollars for an 1,100 square foot plot of Genesis City. This is a virtual environment that you can't really get to yet. Great. I mean, this just seems like a cash grab.
I mean, it probably is. And that's where I mean, like, that.
But people are still buying it.
But people buy fucking space mining.
Yeah.
Buying stock in a space mining company is no fucking different than buying digital real estate. And that's what I mean. Like, one seems more investment worthy because, oh, it's tangible. There's actually gigantic asteroids of fucking gold floating around out there, and we could land. We've actually got a Japanese rover just bought back a gram of fucking material from an asteroid. You know what that means? Yeah, it means it cost $20 or $19 million to bring back a fucking gram. So that's not profitable at all.
The lander almost launched itself off of the surface of the asteroid when it fired the drill because, you know, kinetic energy in space.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So asteroid mining is really, if anything, it's going to be easier to develop digital property than asteroid mine. But both are just as fucking useless in the current paradigm. And that's what I mean. Like, what? Even further, like, there does not need to be a new building built in America right now, or I don't know, on the rest of the planet right now. We don't need any new buildings. We just need to, like, figure out what the fuck we are doing with the ones we have, and then work from there. But there's like probably thousands or hundreds of thousands of new buildings being created right now.
There are, as of December 24th, 2019, there were more than 633,000 homeless people and 13.9 million vacant homes in the United States.
And probably a shitload under construction with no buyers or potential people who already have homes buying multiple properties to sell them or rent them to someone who doesn't exist. So this is where I mean, like, those people don't know what the fuck they're doing with physical property. It's not the digital property that's the problem. It's the people who are sitting on a ton of capital, making it look like they know what they're doing when they don't. These people with all this physical property, they have no fucking idea what they're doing right now. And the only reason they even look like they do is because they're old. That's it. If these people were like 20 and were making the decisions they were making, people were like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But because it's everybody, it reminds people of their grandparents. They're like, oh, Joe Biden really knows what they're doing. He knows what he's doing, or whoever's in Congress, whatever fucking person is spending $1 trillion to like patch up the infrastructure that's just going to fall apart again. Yeah, grandma knows what she's doing. That's all. That's all it is. They can't call out their fucking grandparents. They're too scared. So grandparents keep patching up the fucking infrastructure. Infrastructure keeps falling apart. Fucking, I mean, we keep making the same fucking dumbass mistakes. Like this shit with the Astroworld concert. We keep making the same fucking mistakes because the same people who are in charge are like the ones who've been there for the last 50 years, not doing anything fucking different. Somebody needs to take the keys away from grandma and granddad. Like straight up. We can't be having these concerts. Like, I mean, just as an example, the way that this concert didn't follow any fucking regulations, we couldn't have seen this coming. Yeah, the fuck you could have seen this coming. They know what causes surge. They know how to prevent this. They just didn't have enough people proportionate to the size of the crowd. They didn't have enough space proportionate to the size of the crowd. They didn't have enough barriers proportionate to the size of the crowd. So there's all these things that they did not have in place that now that they're now saying we couldn't have seen this coming, but this has happened so many times before. And somebody pointed out it's like often worse when it's like a closed space, but that doesn't mean open spaces are safe. That just means people die in higher concentration when there's fewer exits, is what that means. Because in closed spaces, it's often like only 2 or 3 exits. You're supposed to be like, because of there was like a case in the early 1900s when a bunch of workers in a factory, like someone had either set a fire or yelled fire, and because of the stampede, people died trying to get out the fire escape, and that's what ended up killing them. So from then, we've had regulations in places about fire escapes, about exits, about the number of people proportionate to the number of exits. That shit's been in place for over 100 years now. We know this shit. And then people will come and say, we couldn't have seen this coming when people fucking died. There's no excuse except for the fact that it's fucking grandma and granddad still in the fucking driver's seat of the rule making. The same people who were making the rules during the first Woodstock are fucking making the rules now. Literally.
So
it's the same fucking people.
when was the last time that you were a part of a structured fire drill or tornado drill?
I mean, when I worked at Starbucks.
Okay. So
Like that was like 15, 20 years ago.
yeah. And that's like one company out of all the jobs that you've had or schools you've attended. That's one example, but I'm sure that there have been other places you've worked that never even had a disaster management plan in place, or one that was published internally. Because
I mean, IU does them.
Yeah.
I remember them happening at IU ever so often.
yeah,
Especially in Ballantyne. They definitely did them in Ballantyne more frequently.
I think Ballantyne's unique because it's so huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably why, because
Yeah.
it was I think it was the building besides the library that had the most floors. So it had the most people that needed to be cleared out. So that's probably why they ran it there the most frequently.
Yeah. But still,
And
like,
I
don't think that's the common.
They did it in the library a lot too. Now that I think
I
about
think
it,
libraries are like the one place that always has like a very obvious like emergency evacuation plan posted at every access point to a hall or to a stairwell or anything like that. But
well, because especially during finals weeks and shit, I remember that they would like let people know that they were going to run drills. So I know that they actively had them in the library,
Yeah.
which is where, these are the places with the most floors and the highest concentration. So that makes sense. But that's again, then you see like how many of the sprinklers are actually working, like I'm looking at a lot of these systems where, because you can't necessarily set off the sprinklers every 5 weeks or some shit. So you can't,
especially not in the library.
Right. So sometimes they'll have these sprinkler systems that haven't been tested in over a decade or maybe even longer than that because they can't physically, like you said, you can't turn on the sprinkler system in the library. Like, okay, testing the thing just to preserve it, now you destroyed it. So there are things about the systems that themselves that make it difficult to ensure that what you're doing isn't just theater, but that's what regulatory checks are meant to be, but then those become theater too. So it's like, man, I think the problem is when people just get too old and they get complacent.
Well,
ultimately,
I think that the disaster management plan drills at the like a professional level are for the employees, the staff, that kind of thing, because they're the ones who would be called upon to help direct everyone out, like students or visitors, guests, whatever they are, customers,
right.
patrons. So it's not. I don't think the expectation is that a random person would know how to do those things, but on some level, I wonder when was the last time. If we took a random sampling of the population, when was the last time that somebody went and experienced a fire drill anywhere? And I bet it's a lot lower. I bet it's like a long time ago for most people.
Right. I mean, but then, like you're saying, you have to direct people. So when we actually had a tornado while we were in Starbucks, it's like you have people who don't want to fucking listen. They just want to sit in your store and keep drinking their coffee because they don't work for you and that kind of technically don't have to comply. So there's this element of like, you can then kick them out, but you're then going to be kicking out somebody in the fucking tornado, So there's like weird dynamics about being in actual emergencies with people that don't, I mean, the dynamics are not really clear until you're in it. And I think that's where...
How does the liability for something like that work? Like, hey, guy, there's a tornado coming. We've got this giant glass face to our building. Come back in the back. This is corporate protocol. I have to tell you to come back here, and you're supposed to come back with me. And it's like, nah, bro, I'm cool. I'm drinking this mocha latte Javachino. It's perfect. I don't want to move. And it's like, they get, something flies through the glass and cuts them up real bad. They don't die, but they're cut up real bad, like disfigured, cut up. Do they get to sue Starbucks now?
Depending on what the person told them to do or not do, and I think that's the biggest problem is like, if that person gave them some terrible advice, like, hey, go crouch by that chair. And then they're like right by the window. Yeah, they may be able to sue Starbucks because the person who was the manager at the time told them to do that. And because that was the Starbucks representative, then all of a sudden Starbucks is being sued. So that is, I think, the difference between a manager who or a person in charge who's been trained to respond to not put people in danger in such a way that then it can be turned back on them.
But if the Starbucks employee does all of the warnings and says, hey, come hide behind this thing with all the rest of us like a sane person, and the person just doesn't do it.
Yeah, then they'd probably be in the clear completely, and that would probably never even make it to trial. Yeah. And this is the difference between, one thing I've learned is like, for all the bullshit it is, the justice system is fairly good about weeding out frivolous stuff so it doesn't make it to trial. Yeah. So something where it looks completely frivolous will be clear versus something that is like not super clear where it does need to have some deliberation. So those two situations, even though they're almost the same outcome, it's very clear if there's like 30 people crouched behind a place and none of those people get hurt, and this one fucking idiot who didn't listen is the one guy who turns around and sues, then you're actually going to have 30 witnesses to be like, yeah, the manager told us all to get behind here, and this fucking dumbass was sitting here drinking his coffee, and the fucking glass just shattered, and he starts screaming, and he's like, help me, and we're like stuck behind the thing with the manager, and we're like, we can't go out there and help him, because we're like trying not to get cut by the glass, because the manager told us not to. So then you have all that supporting against the guy. So that's where I'm like, it would be effectively too frivolous to the point where he could get countersued for the time and damages incurred for the like suit itself. So it's like it would be too much of a risk for him to actually sue someone. Like that's what the lawyer would probably tell him if he's the one person that got hurt and 30 other people who were told what to do and listen didn't get hurt. So like that's where again, coming back to the lady with the fucking McDonald's coffee scalding shit, like the reason that shit is so incorrectly interpreted in people's heads is because McDonald's did such a PR hit job on that woman that like the actual details of the case are completely like gone in popular culture. So like that woman, she didn't even want a ton of money from it. So it was like she wanted to get her hospital bills and her damages for like her psyche compensated, but the lady had like 3rd-degree burns because it was like they had heated the coffee to over 180 degrees, so it was like 210 or 200. It was like over boiling. So like the coffee itself was like hotter than normal coffee is even supposed to be. It wasn't even that she just spilled it on herself. It was that it was literally
like melting through the container.
Melting fucking hot coffee that's like hotter than normal. And that's what like caused her so much damage to her skin. Because if it was like normal, it would still have caused like 2nd-degree burns, more than likely, even, you know, because she's older, her skin's like not as elastic. Yeah. So like a younger person might have gotten away with maybe 1st-degree, but the temperature was supposed to be served. It would have been probably like 2nd at the most because it was so hot. That's why she got 3rd-degree burns. And it wasn't even like the cup, the lid on the cup wasn't secure. So everything that happened, it was all the person who was working that day's fault. But they did so much PR to try to make McDonald's like they tried to make themselves not look bad. That in popular culture's mind, that lady's at fault, even though it's 100% fucking McDonald's fault because she happened to be an older lady who couldn't hold the fucking weight of the coffee that they handed to her because she's like 90 something. So that's why she spilled it, not because she's trying to fucking get herself a fucking payout, because they gave her a coffee that was too heavy for this old lady not paying attention to who they're handing it to. So that's where I'm like, there was when I went back and like reread about that shit, that's where I'm like, it's way too easy to influence how people like side with corporations because you don't even know when the propaganda is like being planted or where it's coming from. Like all of the shit that was, who knows how many fucking SNL writers or whatever got paid by McDonald's to be like, hey, you know, I really enjoy your writing. Can you drop a joke about that old lady? I think this is really play right now. And it's like those people thinking that, oh, I'm getting a really lucky payday for this oddly specific joke request, not understanding what's happening at the time. But then you look at it in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, clearly there's like PR hit happening on this old lady. So it's like easy to see in retrospect, but even the people who are probably the hands of it at the time couldn't see it because the way that shit goes down, like the closer you are to it, the harder it is to see the big picture, which is the irony of like people's understandings of conspiracies. Like I had a friend who used to work at Raytheon. It's like when you're building a big something that's big, you only work on a small portion of it to make sure that small portion works. You don't even necessarily have the larger schematics. You only have the schematics for the piece you're working on. And it's not even about need to know. That's part of it. But the more information about something someone has that's not necessarily ready to work what they're working on, the more distraction they have. So when people at Raytheon are like working on weapon systems, the people who are doing the trajectory calculations, they might not even know whether the trajectories they're working on are for field tests or for something that's happening in the actual live theater. And that's where it can be compartmentalized like that. So somebody who thinks that they're like doing geo-tracking for fucking seeing what farm crops would be useful could actually be tracking buildings which have the highest populations of people to send drones, and then they find out months or years after they were doing it. So this is where I mean, like, the way conspiracies actually happen, you may not, like I said, you may not even know what you're doing when you're doing it because of how close you are. You're only looking at one small piece of it. And that's where it's like the higher level, the larger the operation, the less the people on the ground know about the entire operation, no matter what organization that is. That's just the way organizations work. It doesn't have to be clandestine. The bigger an organization gets, the more impossible it is to know exactly what's happening across that entire organization. That's just the way organizations work, period. It don't, like I said, it don't have to be fucking CIA Black Ops. Just go to your fucking Walmart. Ask somebody in the fucking video game section what's happening in the sports section at any given moment. They don't fucking know.
No, wait. I got it. This is if it's like in terms of an organization like Spectre. The guy who works in the sporting goods section at Walmart, let's find out what he knows about the commodities exchange. I bet it's like absolutely nothing.
I'm certain it's nothing.
I think that's what you're getting at, is the greater the level of organization sophistication, like being a person on the ground peddling wares has practically, it only has statistical influence, and it may only contribute to the statistical influence of decision making at the highest levels.
Yeah. And this isn't even about conspiracies. Again, like, this is to say that it is really, really difficult to actually coordinate the larger the group, the harder it is to coordinate their actions, which means it's like, that's why it's hard for the CEO of Walmart to prevent somebody working in the truck from stealing off the truck. You can't as a CEO ensure that the person working in the warehouse fucking emptying the truck isn't stealing off the truck, because that's at the end. Like, that's so far. You'd have to leave your office, drive down, just pick one of the thousands of warehouses you have to go check, go make sure this random dude isn't stealing off the truck. Now you have to go to the next one to make sure that random dude isn't stealing off the truck. So the notion of like these people who are at the tops of organizations even actually being able to regulate their organizations is pretty absurd. They can't. Like, I know everybody, anybody listening to this has worked for a boss that was not there at the time, and they've done something that boss paid them for that they shouldn't have been doing. It doesn't even matter what it is. Everybody's done it. That's just the nature of these jobs because of hourly pay. It's like, you shouldn't be talking to your friends on the job. Like if your friend shows up and is like, hey, having a conversation, that shouldn't really happen at any job. I'm not saying people don't do it, but technically anything that's like really beyond what you're doing for that job isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And everybody does that shit. I know I've done it. So it's not like I'm trying to condemn people. It's like that's what happens when you're compensated for being in a physical place by the hour. Eventually, you're going to be doing some shit in that physical place that you're going to be paid for that they're not paying you to do. Again, that's just the nature of the beast. So this is where I'm saying, like, all of these people who believe in conspiracy theories probably have never actually had to organize a group. Because, like, you try to organize, like, 4 people, that shit is difficult as fuck, let alone a conspiracy of thousands or hundreds of thousands. Fuck out of here, man. Fuck out of here. Like, you can't, the people at Starbucks and Walmart and McDonald's and Applebee's, none of these people can operate their organizations with what they just call it shrink now. What happens is everybody who runs an organization is going to have people who come through that steal shit from them. So it's like they just give it a corporate term. We're going to call it shrink. Yeah, your motherfucking employees are stealing from you, but you're going to quantify it. So we can say, yeah, we reduced our shrink this year. I mean, a lot of times it's customers, which is also, there's no better. But when you have people stealing from you and then you just quantify it to make it better, that's like, they can't control their environment, so they try to put a number on it to make it look like they can control it. We're going to reduce shrink. Well, people are still fucking stealing from you. You can't stop people from stealing from you, no matter how many cameras you have, no matter how many hotspots you fucking declare. Because then you realize, like, Best Buy had a policy. I worked security there. You weren't even allowed to stop the people. If you knew somebody was stealing, you could not physically stop them from walking out the store.
I worked at a what do you call it? A cafeteria years ago, and I remember I at one point was up in the office, like doing the counting down the drawer, and my employer, he had this camera system, and I was aware of the camera systems because I'd seen the cameras, but I'd never seen like the readout. Never seen the displays. And he was sitting there watching. I said, anything good on? And he said something about cameras are like, were really weird. Like he said he like never noticed a lot of these things before he had the cameras, but once he did, he couldn't unnotice them. And then that the thing that the cameras were really best for was watching his employees. And then because there are more times than not, he was able to find like problem employee behavior, and only occasionally did it come in handy when verifying or the claims of the behavior of some customer. That it was really like employee surveillance, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of where we don't talk about the panopticon enough. I mean, not us, but society. Because the panopticon is so prevalent in our spaces, that's why it's hidden itself so we don't discuss it. And that's where you see what I'm saying? It's so prevalent that it's forced us not to talk about it. So we just all deal with it in all these spaces, because if we talk about it, that'd be acknowledging it, and then it would be acknowledging that, like, hey, we're always under. I mean, the surveillance state, it was hot for a minute, but then I think people got like surveillance state fatigue or something, and then just
I think they're like, wait, these people are watching me. Okay, if you're gonna watch, then I'm gonna do this, and they started doing really absurd things in some effort to be like, yeah, you don't even need to pay attention to me because I'm not even doing anything worth watching. And that's kind of where we are. There's a lot of like there's so much entertainment being produced that it's impossible to watch all of it. And even if you even if you did watch all of it, the vast majority of it would be really like an exercise in tolerance.
It's mostly bad. Western stuff's really bad, especially the cartoons.
I'm not even getting into the cartoons. I'm just talking about like
God.
the reality TV stuff that just exists in Western media. Everything is a reality show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got around paying writers.
Well, that's why we have so many of the same shows.
Yeah. I end up going back to the properties that I like, and I'll frequently try new stuff that seems to be something that might appeal to me, but I'll try some shit, and then something will jump out to me about it that I'll immediately not like, and I can't keep watching it, and I'm like, like I tried to watch Intergalactic, because there was like, when Dune came out, people just started suggesting their favorite sci-fis, and somebody put it like Intergalactic. So I started watching it, and I immediately, the first episode's basically like all alarms, and that shit. I hate it when producers use gimmicky stuff to like evoke reactions, like biological reactions in the viewer, because it's like, oh yeah, you can just set off an alarm and it's going to make people go into fight or flight. Yeah, that's fucking easy. But the real suspenseful person or the suspenseful director and producer can make it so it's like the most silent scene is what is making your heart race. And so I'm just tired of like, because I hate jump scares in video games too. Like BioShock, it was pretty, but they leaned on the jump scares so much. I'm like, fucking get this shit away from me, man. Like BioShock Infinite, I couldn't get into it because they kept leaning on the jump scare so much. Where I'm like, okay, this is cheap. You're just abusing like a biological reaction to progress or make it feel like you're doing something. And when movie directors do it or video game producers do it or fucking actual literature writers do it, like you can just do that shit by writing some gory words or something just horrific. Like, yeah, that's the easy way to do it. And I just can't stand when people do that shit. It's like they're trying to appeal to teenagers. But the problem is there's adults who then never grew up and are like, oh, this is the greatest fucking shit ever, man. It's so cool. Like all the people who love the Saw movies and shit. It's like, okay, I get like one or two, but that shit never should have became a franchise, because that's like, it's cool for teenagers. Like I'm not trying to shit on adults that are into horror. It's a matter of like, gore should have never become a societal pillar, because then people get desensitized to it, and here we are. So that's where I'm like, it's not even a matter about trying to shame people or be like, your particular preference for media is like something that is rotting society. It's a matter of Americans can't handle that shit. And this is something where I'm looking at it like the more that Americans consume something, the more of that thing is produced, and the quality just keeps getting lower and lower and lower, to the point where then you look at Amazon and they have movies like Lamageddon or Space Truckers or some shit where you're like,
Space Truckers.
Who fucking greenlit this movie? Who greenlit Space Truckers? Like, for fuck's sake, man. And that's where I just look at all of there's like these shit movies that should have never, ever, ever been made. And sometimes, yeah, watch them just to like watch the shitty, like B movie, because that's the mindset you're in.
I mean,
that's where I'm like,
look, Han Solo and Chewbacca
this?
were space truckers. There you go. That's the baddest ass space
Yeah.
trucker story that exists so far.
That's not inaccurate, but the issue is if they would have
No,
been
I'm just
called
saying, like,
space truckers,
we already have a space trucker story. Why did they have to make a different
Yeah.
one?
No, I mean because Americans will consume it. There's some American out there that's like, oh, I liked Han Solo and that Chewbacca, man. I want some more of that space trucker story. That's like the eventual end of why we should have never had Solo in the way we did. Like, we didn't need Solo's story as a prequel, especially learning how he became a space trucker. You know what I mean? But selling people the fucking gristle from Disney, now we get the fucking real fucking gristle down on Amazon with space truckers. And that's where I'm like, man, space truckers should have never been, that combination of words should have never been put together. But because somebody's like, hey, you know what? If you really think about it, Han Solo and Chewbacca are kind of space truckers. We should make a movie about space truckers. And then somebody's like, yeah, that's a real good idea. And then somehow we end up with space truckers, which is where I'm like, that's not an inaccurate observation. Han Solo, fucking Lando Calrissian, 100% space truckers. But they didn't need a space trucker movie. Like, we don't need space truckers, the final adventure, the final cargo load. Like, I don't know what space truckers is actually about. I'm assuming hauling cargo, because that's what I would assume space truckers would do.
So, when I think of, okay, so the most fun, air quote, real world space trucker or trucker movie that I can think of is Big Trouble in Little China. And only a very small portion of it takes place in a truck. And the rest of it's this trucker who assists the spiritual side of Little China go to war with the underworld that's somehow located in San Francisco. And it's a fantastic story because the truck driver, Jack Burton, he's basically the comic relief. He's the sidekick. He thinks he's the main course, but he's really the sidekick. And it's fantastic. He does a great job, helps save the day, goes on to think he's the reason the world was saved, but he was one cog in a very finely tuned machine that happened to come together and do its job. Good stuff. It's I dare say it's one of the more fun Western kung fu movies, and has pretty decent choreography too for the time. But that's a trucker movie. That's a trucker story. It's about a trucker. I hope that Space Truckers is less time on a spaceship and more people getting into trouble in like seedy back alley deals and cargo that they probably shouldn't be carrying. And I'm not sure how they can run away from the Galactic Police if they've got some cargo and they're a cargo ship and Galactic Police has like interdiction vessels that can clearly go faster.
Somehow Stephen Dorff and Dennis Hopper in this movie.
Well, then it's going to be a good movie. Space Truckers. I need to.
Cargo turned out to be a multitude of unstoppable and deadly killer robots. Yeah.
Wow. The 90s. Oh, look at this thing. This thing's hideous.
Oh man. Yeah, and that's where I'm like, I still have not watched it and I probably never will, but I always see it and I'm like, how the fuck did this get made? Fucking Space Truckers, man. Yeah. At some point, Stephen Dorff saw the script and was like, you know what? This is going to really help my career, Space Truckers. Dennis Hopper's like, yeah, might even get Academy Awards. This
could be my ticket back onto the screen.
I cried when I read the script. Space Truckers, it might be the next Star Wars, man. Hopefully, we'll make Space Truckers 2. Maybe it'll be a trilogy.
This just looks terrible.
And not to go off on Space Truckers specifically, but it's like that. That is the gristle, man. There's only one Star Wars.
This is colorful like Fifth Element, but all the framing is so tight that it screams TV movie production. Everything is just. Well, here's a scene that's not tight. Nope, it's definitely all close-ups. Everything is tightly framed. There's no scenery. This is like a movie of the week. This is basically a made-for-TV movie that had a little bit extra budget. Like a bunch of those like 80s and 90s science fiction movies where they tried to rely on practical effects, but they couldn't quite get the futuristic materials to look right. Everything looked like it was made out of plastic that they carved out of a sheet of plastic.
Getting surfaces correct is not easy. Like I was just rewatching Titan season 2, and while the Trigon render is not bad, the surface of it is like really bad. So it looks so CGI, and that's where I'm like, I could see people's complaints about it because it's not easy to get surfaces, like light off of surfaces correct. That's a really difficult thing to do.
Wow, the robots in this look like women wearing high heels that are walking around really uncomfortably. And these weird helmets that make them look strange. Wow, what a terrible... It's like a bad... No, here's some practical effects. It was a bad hybrid of practical effects and CGI, middle 90s CGI.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Steven Dorff is shirtless.
I've been watching riff tracks.
I love riff tracks.
Yeah, just ever so often, like, and they did Samurai Cop on one, and I'm like, why is this dude a samurai? I have no idea, but apparently there's a couple scenes where he has a sword. Because I fell asleep, because like that's when I generally start watching them. But the movie's called Samurai Cop, and that's when I'm like, I think I stayed awake for a good half an hour, but I just could not understand why he was a samurai or where even the samurai was. But I'm learning now that it's supposed to be this dude on there, just because he has a sword and long hair.
They named the entire movie about a minor character who appears for like 30 seconds of total screen time.
I mean, I guess I still don't know if he's actually a samurai or supposed to be the samurai, or if they just called that Samurai Cop because he has a sword. But that's also why, like, how did this movie get made, man? How did somebody say, oh, it's Samurai Cop? Yeah, green light that one, man. And then who knows what was the budget?
Whoa. Okay, so there's Samurai Cop, the Samurai Cop riff tracks live. There's Samurai Cop 2.
Yeah.
Okay. He kind of looks like a variation on Rambo.
I mean, that's what the promo shots look like, but the movie itself is just, I had no idea what the fuck was even going on. Yeah.
And it's not an hour and 36 minutes of nonsense.
Yeah, it's not because of the riff track stuff either. It was just complete nonsense. Where you could tell the people who made it were like, okay, this guy has muscles, Let's get him a sword and we'll string together some action shots and like throw in some Yakuza or some shit and people will eat it up. And then call it Samurai Cop. And that's like
the guy who plays the samurai cop probably bought a sword and was walking down the street one day, and some dude was walking the other way on his giant brick cell phone and stopped like, you there, you'd be perfect for this movie I want to make. and he takes the guy in and they're like, hey, what do you think, guys? He looks just like Rambo. And everyone in the room says, I mean, kind of. And they make a movie.
Man. Yeah, the first installment in the franchise.
Wait, there's like gratuitous nudity in this.
Was there?
Yeah, there is. It's like 14 minutes in. Okay, this is like. Actually, that's like par for the course for my expectations for movies from the 90s, like B movies from the 90s. There will be gratuitous titties. There will be gratuitous gunshots that for whatever reason nobody can hit anything.
Oh, they might have taken it off because I watched it on. Well, no, YouTube isn't even censoring shit anymore. Maybe Riff Tracks edited out.
There's
they do edit boobs out.
Yeah, they probably do. I mean, what can they do other than like sound like a bunch of guys at a stag flick? What can they really make fun of that? Yeah, this character's getting laid. We don't actually have a problem with that. Good for them. I'm glad they found time to do this. That's actually one of those. That's one of those things that never made sense to me. It's like, what? Why do they have time to do this? It's like, how is this? What the hell is this doing for this story? I mean, I get it, but.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So now we can apparently confirm that eternity does exist in the MCU based on a response from James Gunn himself.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I basically posed the question of whether Peter Quill could have his powers returned by his mother, with my implying that eternity is his mom because I put hashtag eternity. But James Gunn actually responded saying his mother's Meredith Quill and she's deceased. But I'm like, I know it's his mom, but I didn't know if it was eternity on Earth in human form. And he's like, she's not his mom. And that's what I'm like, but he's basically acknowledging that she exists. So that's where it's funny to me that like this just happened and my mind's still wrapping around it. And he's like, yeah, in response to my supposition that eternity might be on Earth as a human, he said, yes, I know, and she's not Quill's mother explicitly. So he said she's not Quill's mother. And that's a big fucking deal, man. So that's where it's funny to me. There's people who are seeing this and not understanding the implications of what he just responded. And I think like there's going to be like comic book news stories about this post because it's actually a huge fucking reveal. But it's amazing that I don't think a lot of people who don't read comic books understand what was actually just revealed by acknowledging that even though it's not Peter Quill's mom, eternity does in fact exist, because then that means infinity probably exists, probably entropy. So there's a whole
oblivion.
Yeah, there's a whole cosmic family.
And what are the other ones? That means that we're going to get a Living Tribunal story eventually, and they might be able to show us. What are the other? There's another one. There are two more. There's like the Beyonder and the One Above All. If they can reveal all of that through Guardians of the Galaxy universe.
Yeah, because then I was looking. I think Guardians is the only MCU property that has actually name dropped Eternity.
Yeah.
Because then I think they mentioned something about mentioned it in Endgame, but it was not.
Well, and Guardians of the Galaxy is really the only like story mechanism to deliver those characters. Those characters aren't really going to appear in Avengers. What's Tony Stark going to do? Talk to them about technology, and they're going to say, "We are beyond your technology." And like, they're not going to talk to him. What does the universe have to say to a person? I mean, really? It's like, bro, sorry, bro, I didn't know you were there. I couldn't see you. That'll be good though. I like those characters. Those giant characters make for interesting stories. They help us ask really complex philosophical questions. They help us to like see things from a scale and a perspective that ground level stories are incapable of telling. And vice versa, of course. Those stories are about like planets and solar systems and galaxies dying, and not really about individuals. It'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Then in the DC universe, like they have the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor in the CW, so that implies Perpetua.
Yeah.
And their race exists, or in her race. So that's like, yeah, I'm much more. It's not that I more enjoy the cosmic. It's like I enjoy the street level stories when there's a cosmic level story that also exists alongside it more, because it means there's more of
it's a bigger story arc.
Yeah, and macro and micro connection that have meaning, which then makes the micro even more meaningful. So it's like, every street level corner matters in that universe because something is happening on the bigger scale. That's really hard to weave together and make it make sense. Which is,
I mean, how many Marvel movies are there? 20 something?
Yeah, I think we're 24, 6 now.
Jeez. So there's 26 of them.
26, yeah.
There's 26 of them. And at the end of the story arc is Eternals. Okay, so it took 25 movies to get to Eternals. God, it's like, why did it take so long?
I mean, otherwise you can't get the scale, and I feel like they could have. I mean, because that includes the TV shows too. WandaVision, fucking Falcon, Winter Soldier. Those all. I mean, Falcon not so much, but WandaVision definitely helped carry the multiverse forward. So without WandaVision, which is like what, 6 hours?
Yeah, but WandaVision's not tallied in this thing that I'm looking at.
I know, and that's even what I'm saying is like there's actually it actually took even longer to get to Eternals than they're calculating in that tabulation, because they're not calculating WandaVision.
Yeah.
So it's really, if you take out WandaVision or Loki, you don't have as good of an understanding as when you watch Loki and WandaVision. So that's what I mean. Like, it even took more than those 26 films.
I think Loki makes for a better exit from that whole story arc, because it leads us towards Kang. And I'm not really sure. I haven't seen Eternals yet. I've tried to avoid
haven't
everything about
either,
it because the first thing I saw was just like the opposite of praise, and so I thought, oh crap. I just need to like avoid everything about it for a month and then watch it after the clamor and has died down.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't trust anyone's opinion on this. 'Cause
Yeah.
it sounds like the same way they reacted to Man of Steel.
Yeah. I also haven't watched Shang-Chi, but also because I'm trying to not see Xi Jinping's face. But that's probably more on me than that story. I just need to stay away from it for a while.
Yeah, I was just waiting until the shit comes out on for viewing at home. Because I'm not going to a theater ever again. I'm just not. I don't care. I'm vaxxed. I'm about to get my fucking
Your booster
shot as soon as I get as soon as my age group gets passed. But I'm still never going to a theater ever again. Just because fuck theaters, man. I don't need to. I don't trust Americans enough to be in a dark, crowded place with them. They're not trustworthy, and they don't shower. They don't care about spreading their germs. So I don't want to be in spaces with Americans anymore. I would be too in my own head about being in a dark place with a bunch of Americans that I would not be able to enjoy a movie.
I mean, the last time I was in a movie theater, I was one of like 5 people. It was Captain Marvel.
That's the last one I saw.
You know, my shoes stuck to the floor. I'm glad I saw it in a theater because it was good. I'm glad there was no one there, but it was such a horrible experience. I had no desire to go back afterwards.
Yep, that shit the floors were sticky already. I mean, that was pre-pandemic. That was right after the bed bug scare.
Yeah.
So
it was still nasty after the bed bug scare.
I'm cool with Captain Marvel officially being the last film I saw in theaters.
Yeah.
I'm totally cool with that.
Wait. You have a giant 4K TV. I have a giant 4K TV. It's not like we can't like go all kid style and sit 18 inches from the thing and get that full immersion giant screen experience.
Right.
You know, I mean, sure, it sounds great in a movie theater, but surround sound systems are small ones for home use or THX certified, so you can get really fucking close.
Well, and
get as close as you need to get.
That's the thing. I do the opposite. I go like 18 feet away. So when you're at a certain perspective with the TV at a certain size, it looks like those people are just on the other side of a window because of the size. And that's where I'm like, oh shit, I'm watching Titans like from 18 feet. It looks like I'm just looking through a window and that shit is happening on the other side of the window. And that's where the larger than life thing is one thing, but the exact life size is also another that then gives this other weird experience, especially if you're watching like mixed martial arts or some shit.
Okay.
If you stand like 15 feet away, it looks like they're proportionate to yourself. So it gives your brain this weird sensation of like, oh shit, I'm there. And that's kind of where I'm like, I don't even need to physically be in the building. Cause then you look at cage side. The motherfuckers sitting cage side are watching monitors.
Yeah. Because
you get better fucking views.
I'm kind of convinced that anybody who wants to go see live fighting like that close, they really want to get splattered by sweat. They want to smell it. They're paying so they can smell some dude's jock like from 8 feet away. That's what they're in for. They want to smell the smell of their feet and gloves and shit, and they want to get sprayed every time somebody gets punched or thrown or whatever. They want to be right there so they can hear him breathe. That's the kind of, really crazy, discreet, up close, personal experience they're looking for. It's a visceral experience. I'm not interested in that. So I'm glad that somebody wants to pay extra to go up close because it helps subsidize everything else for the rest of us. But I don't know. I just don't get it. I also don't understand, like, people who want to have a pet snake or somebody who wants to have a giant pet bird of prey and go hunting with it. I think it's cool that they do it, but I don't get that. I just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with that. There's some things that I just don't need to. I know enough.
Yeah. And James has even clarified further. So that scene in Guardians where Ego shows Peter what I thought was eternity, even though he says eternity, he's seeing eternal life, not eternity, the Marvel Comics being. And that's like, that was explicitly meant to be him seeing eternal life, not eternity, the being. So that's been further clarified. So even though it's basically that Peter Quill did not see eternity, even though when he sees that thing, he says eternity. So that's where, again, this is actually a big clarification. I mean, that's for anybody who's actually read the comics to know that eternity is a being.
Realistically, we're always looking at eternity, or in the story universe, they're always looking at eternity at night when they look into the sky. They just don't realize it. Mm-hmm. I mean, eternity is, all of existence, essentially, of this, the quotient of space, at least, and we could be on eternity's hand, on the palm of eternity's hand, as represented in the comics, or sitting on top of their forehead, or underneath their foot. We wouldn't know because it's so vast. It's like it's such a gigantic. I mean, conceptually, it's the universe, but so vast and infinite that we can't really appreciate it. That we're looking at eternity.
Yeah.
Like, eternity's thumb is the size of the observable universe. So I think the idea that Quill could, under any kind of influence, perceive eternity and see eternity and acknowledge it, that would actually be that's a really cool moment within a story, if that were the case. If it's not, that's just a comic book fan reading into something.
Yeah.
Which is also cool.
Yeah. And that's where, again, it's like, I feel like if I've made an observation that is close enough that James Gunn needs to shoot it down, I feel like my mind is in the right place. Like, I don't have to be right. James Gunn shot down a theory. He's like, no, that's wrong. That's like an correct interpretation of what I was trying to say.
Yeah, but
so to me,
like 2 hours from now, he's going to be sitting there eating a sandwich, and he's going to be like, "Fuck, that guy was right. That's a really good idea."
I know. I know. But now I know he knows that it would have been a good idea, even though that's not what it was. Which is why I think he probably acknowledged it in the first place. It's like, even though it's wrong, that's not a bad way to have looked at it. Like, because that would have been.
But he also can't be like, yeah, I wish I'd have thought of that.
Right. Of course not. But then it's also, this gets back to the macro and the micro, because then Quill's mom's death would not have been as micro. Like, I mean, even though it wasn't a micro death in the grand scheme anyway, it would just, like, in the same way that Ego was doing a pass in an earthly form, it would have been like eternity doing a pass in an earthly form so she could understand humans. And that's kind of how I saw it. And then it would have been even more of like a cosmic kismet that Ego thought he was getting over on a human, when in fact it was an eternity, like an actual cosmic being. So that's what I thought. Like, and that's where I think, again, he doesn't have to say it. He's smart enough to understand what I was getting at and I wasn't just like with Meredith Quill, a superhuman or something, and she gonna come. Like that's not what he thought I was saying. So I think that's where he responded to it in good faith. Because I think the people who are like, "Does this guy even watch the film?" are doing the bad faith interpretation. And I think that's where I'm like, there's a good faith and a bad faith interpretation of what I was saying. And like, if James Gunn can do the good faith interpretation, I don't understand why all the people jumping in to like try to mock the statement.
Well,
like it's amazing how quick people are like trying to mock me and making themselves look stupid in the process. Like,
I mean, there's one loudmouth schnook that says eternity is a dude, James, and
yeah, like that guy looks like a fucking idiot.
Like, bro, you can see eternity, really?
Oh man,
yeah. The fact that it's like it was ever even gendered in the comics, that's. I mean, these are characters that are old at this point. These are very mature characters that have been in development for decades. I think it's fine if they start to evolve. They don't have to be stuck in the 90s or in the 80s or in the 70s. I mean, if Iron Man was stuck in his OG form, he never would have been able to take on Thanos. It's okay if we have reinterpret eternity or infinity. Like, Oblivion doesn't have to be personified as humanoid. None of these characters do. Actually, what I'm really hoping for is that we get a really good Shumagarath story. Like,
I think one's coming.
Okay, good, because for those that don't know, Shumagarath is essentially the Marvel's version of Cthulhu-like entities, and is this ancient terror that has, extreme telekinetic and telepathic abilities, can make people go insane. He's like Shumagarath's like a Dormammu level baddie. It's probably on a similar level of evil as the entity that controls the symbiotes, but they're not part of MCU yet, officially. But I really would like a Shumagarath story, because that would allow them to bridge into a realm of like Marvel space stories where they could start to get a little bit darker. They don't have to be so happy. Things could actually be kind of thrilling. They could make it's an escape story where they're being chased by the monster, and only at the end do they realize, oh yeah, we can come back for more, to see how we come back next week for the thrilling conclusion, that kind of stuff. But I think we could get a really good Shumagarath story out of the Guardians universe.
Oh yeah, definitely, especially with as Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yeah,
like it would be a lot easier to sort of go on that cosmic level and not have to underpower Shuma. Like,
oh yeah, well, a fully powered Shumagarath, that would like require like everything that Thor has.
Yeah, I think that's
so
like
good.
No coincidence that they kind of hinted at Shuma and what was it? Collector's, like one of his
like he had a piece of Shuma.
Yeah.
God, that's just like dangerous. All you have to do is like crack that containment field and whoops, unleashed the nastiest fucking thing. Well, one of them.
Yeah. And that's, this oh yeah, because then even in the what if, there seemed to be an implication of Shuma, but then I think they were like, no, this is actually the Hydra. And it was like it just happened to look, like Shuma on a smaller scale.
I mean, if Shuma gets onto a planet, it's pretty much done. That's how I've always. That's my memory of any comic involving Shuma Gorath. It's like if he appears someplace, it's bad news for that place.
Well, and now seeing what. Oh well. I think okay. I think they are saying it was Shuma Gorath. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No. Well. Yeah, I don't think it was clear, and I think a lot of people were just speculating, is what it looks like. But it definitely started to look like Shuma. But that's where I'm like, I feel like they're just pacing this stuff. So the cosmic, like that, the fight between Ultron and Uatu was it really felt like cosmic scale. So that's where, they're really starting to get these cosmic beings.
I mean,
their battles right.
Their images of Shuma Gorath, like the eye of Shuma Gorath is larger than a star. Shuma Gorath can be as big as an entire solar system. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing that I guess Doctor Strange could make for a good character in a Shuma Gorath story. He would probably be one of the few people who could stand a chance of, like, keeping his brain intact, his mind intact from the telepathic attacks. But I think that Guardians makes for the most interesting version of it, because they're already in space. They're already in a place where they can engage Shuma Gorath.
Yeah. Yeah, off planet it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah.
To represent that scale. Yeah, I feel like trying to put Shuma Gorath on Earth would just fucking
it'd be like the Star Bridge tower, like wrapping around the planet. There'd just be a big tentacle wrapped around the Earth.
Yeah, that could be interesting to see, though.
Get these little slimy mini Shumas like oozing out of the tentacles and attacking people.
Yeah, and there's just a gigantic eye covering the sky.
Yeah. Instead of the sun, it's just a backlit eye with tentacles coming out of it. See, we've already written a Shuma Gorath story. They can make this, it'll be awesome.
Yeah.
The Avengers are powerless. What are they going to do? They're going to call in everyone they can think of. That would be a good vector for Binary to emerge from Captain Marvel, like the final form.
Yeah,
there's a lot they can do with a villain who's that big and powerful. I mean, that's like a legit big bad, a truly big bad.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like we have to actually get the scale set before we can introduce them, or else it will be wasted on the audience.
Yeah. Like
Thanos is cool, but he's not really a big bad yet. Like, even though he could snap away half the universe, like he's not a planet eater. He's not. I mean, he could snap away a planet, but that's not really him. That's like that's multiple cosmic beings all together, and he's just wielding their power. So that's kind of like misrepresentative even. So that's where somebody like Galactus, Thanos without the glove trying to go up against Galactus. That'd be fucking absurd. That
would just be funny.
Yeah,
it'd be a little man with a toothpick, or swinging a piece of metal that's little more than a toothpick to Galactus, and like tapping on the toe of his boot, like, "Come down here and fight me." And Thanos looks at her, it's like, "I can't even see you." Or sorry, Galactus.
Yeah, so that's where like there's Galactus he's not even cosmic scale, and that's the craziest shit about him.
No, he's just big.
Yeah, having that scale between, there's the planet eater, and then I guess you can call them god eaters. Like having that difference, it takes a while to set it up.
Yeah,
because even how do you make the god eater status important without having the people who worship the god be important too? Yeah. Otherwise, that god is useless if it has no.
Shumagarath is kind of like a virus to eternity.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Old ones, many angled ones.
And then, no, that was monitor, anti-monitor. I always get Galactus and Monitor's histories all mixed up because they're not too far off from each other.
Yeah, there are a lot of characters that are like that, though. Like Superman and Hyperion are almost the same, except for Hyperion's just insane, and Superman is not. And there are all manner of threads on the internet where people try to dissect who would win in a fight between Superman and Hyperion. And some people always say, "Oh, Hyperion's just crazy. He's insane. He has no brakes on his moral freight train."
Mm-hmm.
And but Superman always pulls through. So it's hard to say. When I was reading about all that stuff, I found myself going down this really weird rabbit hole of superhero physics and the various powers and force that they wield. And one person mentioned the cartoon force, Toon Force, which is what Bugs Bunny wields. And essentially, they argue that Toon Force is the most powerful force to affect the laws of physics as they exist, because a cartoon character can get squashed by a planet and survive. They'll just climb out from the cracks and dust themselves off and make a joke about it.
But that person's trying to apply 3-dimensional physics to 2 dimensions.
Well, I think that's the point. Is
by
that
2-dimensional physics, that's like they're actually working in 2-dimensional physics, not 3D.
Sure, but that's the idea, is that even then, but the other part of it is that Toon Force doesn't actually hurt people. It's just there to make fun of things and make things funny.
Well, what I'm getting at is, I don't know if you've seen Orville, but they transition into the second dimension, so everything, like even their drives function differently because it's 2 dimensions, and it's like,
oh, that's cool.
They have to operate at a different. They have to start operating differently and thinking laterally instead of in 3 dimensions, and in order to make things work right. So that was a pretty interesting, self-aware injection of 2D.
I think that's the
physics into a 2D show that actually gets created in 3D.
Yeah. I think that's the kind of thing that the Toon Force does also, is that it breaks the fourth wall, and it's just capable of doing things that physics don't allow, essentially. And so that's how we end up with characters that break the fourth wall. Is they bend the laws of physics to their will. There aren't that many characters that are like that, though. I don't think Bugs Bunny's going to get into a fight with Superman. He might crack wise about Clark's hair, but that's probably it. Although I do think it would be funny, to see what would happen if somebody got really mad and tried to chase, like if Wolverine got really mad at Bugs Bunny and tried to chase him around. I mean, we know he's not going to catch him.
Oh, apparently the limitation of the Toon Force is or one of them, users are limited to bypassing the laws of physics and cannot create entire universes through this ability.
Yeah.
So that's where like the 2D world in Orville is like an entire plane of existence in 2 dimensions, which is it's self-aware and meta, but in that context, it's like it was a live action show that then goes into the second dimension or into the second dimensional realm and becomes animated. So it's not out of line with the Toon Force, and that's kind of where effectively the Toon Force would be existing only in a 2-dimensional world, or like the 3D version of a cartoon would not necessarily exist in the Toon Force version of that world. Like,
I mean, Space Jam.
that's like a blend because it's reality warping, but it's not a whole 2.5D or 2-dimensional world. Like, and that's where the Toon Force would be something like Space Jam rather than the Orville. I mean, like the Orville 2D episode is like applying this concept to an entire world that is connected to the third dimension, that is like aware of the third dimension existing, and they're aware of, well, the second dimensional beings aren't aware of the third dimensional beings, but when the third dimensional beings go into it, they become aware that the second dimensional beings exist. And then that's how they're trying to, like, the way that the explanation of hyperdimensional beings not being able to see lower level beings is what they're trying to do in the Orville episode explicitly, but doing it from the reverse, from the second dimension to the third.
I found a picture of the 2D realm, and it's being compared to Tron. It looks like circuit board. It looks pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and then the way that they make it, it makes it easier to understand because they like connected to like Tron, which is something that obviously people have a visual connection to, but in Carl Sagan's original framing, he's trying to explain tessellation or tesseracts, which are fourth dimensional objects, or he's talking about potentially beings that are like, if you take the third dimension and fold it on a 90-degree axis, that would be a tesseract. And we can't see it because we're only in 3 dimensions, but this is where that examination of a second dimensional world is that Carl Sagan concept more, and it's looking at that concept more than like cartoon physics necessarily, where I'm saying like that is the root of what McFarlane was trying to explore by going into a 2-dimensional world, in that obviously cartoon physics still apply, but that was like not necessarily what he was trying to do with that.
Yeah. I think cartoon physics in storytelling acts as a very good, like, hand of God level mechanism to move a story along. I think it takes a lot of creativity actually to pull it off properly. Otherwise, it ends up just being hokey.
Yeah, and otherwise, it can't pull you out of the world because it has to It has to work with the world, otherwise it breaks the immersion. And I think that's how you have to play with it well, because like nobody ever really questions how the Joker survives because it works within that world.
Well, I've decided that it's because he's so insane that he just disregards the laws of physics, and because they no longer apply to him, he can just walk away
Toon
from
Force.
it. I know that's totally Toon Force.
Yeah, and that's where again it's like nobody questions the Toon Force in Gotham City because it doesn't break the immersion of Gotham Cities. Like Solomon Grundy might rise because of Dr. Hugo Strange's activities. So this dude who can fall off of a building onto a car and survive, even though it's Toon Force, it still works so it doesn't break your immersion for Gotham City.
Batman falls off of like the 4th floor of a building onto a car, and then like something falls on him, lands on him, and he gets up and walks away without broken ribs. So
yeah,
obviously the Toon Force in Gotham is strong.
Yep.
Because there should be like way more people with like casts on their arms or legs, and there should be like broken down cars on the side of the road that have been crashed into by other people's bad driving. The glass and brick industry is thriving in Gotham because they've always got to repair buildings. Gotham's old, and they have a lot of brick buildings, and they refuse to modernize like Metropolis and build things out of, you know, cement and concrete slabs and steel. I could never understand, like, you know, like Silver City is pretty modern, Metropolis is modern, what is it, Star City is modern as hell because of Star Labs. Why is Gotham stuck in like 1920s Chicago? Why is everything still made out of brick? Why is it all Art Deco still? Why haven't they invested in modern infrastructure? I mean, is the Wayne Foundation really withholding all of their resources to that degree? I mean, obviously, because he's a billionaire.
Well, I mean,
Gotham sucks because the Wayne family was hoarding billions of dollars.
Yeah. I feel like that's supposed to be part of it, though, because then you can't really get a sense of the crime families owning the city if everything's modern. You know, if everything's up to date, if buildings are up to date, that means companies feel safe building there, which is a sign of infrastructure. So you can't have that if you're trying to portray dilapidated fucking. I noticed in the Titans, it's like anytime a Gotham taxi picks you up, it's like, what are you doing here? Why aren't you in Boston? like, bro, I'm just trying to go downtown. Why are you telling me I should not be in this city? I mean, and that's kind of where, like,
in a modern Gotham, the Penguin is a businessman who owns a lot of like shorefront warehouses and is involved in, like, you know, trafficking. And Two-Face is a lawyer. He's a public-facing attorney. He's just two-faced. And Black Mask, that guy's just crazy. But he's a contractor, and he works with chemicals. And then Falcone, he's in the contracting business. He builds all of the buildings and housing and all that stuff. And you know, Maroni's the same way. He owns a contract business. I guess Black Mask can be like Tony Soprano. He can run all the waste contracts. They're all just
because they had this in
they just have normal jobs.
Nolan. Well, I'm saying in the Nolan Batman series, Thomas Wayne was trying to build up the city, but then fucking Ra's al Ghul destroyed it. So it's like anytime they would try to build something up, people would destroy it. So I think that's kind of where, again, you can't imply that level of constant destruction if every part of the city looks modern. So it has to sort of look like any attempts at modernizing probably failed. I think to get across the actual
I
the difference between Gotham City and Star City. Like there has to be a difference.
you're right, because it'd be really weird if all the stories in Gotham took place on like the trading floor at the Gotham Stock Exchange. Like, and that's really where a modern Gotham story would be. It would be a bunch of day traders and stockbrokers, like making calls on their burner phones to push prices up so they can sell some commodity and make some money.
Yeah,
that's like,
I think that's how. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I want to say that's how Joker stole Bruce's fortune.
So there's one really hilarious scene from the animated series where Joker has his accountant there, and his accountant tells him that he owes the federal government like a couple $100,000, and he's like, I'll go
Set
get
course for Engage base drive.